everybody. It's great that you're taking time out of a warm, sunny day in springtime Vermont to spend the next hour with us. We very much appreciate it. My name is Joe Bergeron. I'm president of the Association of Vermont Creditors, for those of you that I haven't had the privilege of meeting before, although I recognize some of the names on here. Also with me from the association is Christine Davidson, who's vice president of the association. Probably more of you have met her than have met me. And we're really privileged and honored to have with us today folks from the Department of Motor Vehicles. Wanda Minoli is commissioner of the department. And thank you, Wanda, for joining us. And joining her today are her Director of Operations, Mike Smith, and Assistant Attorney General, Sven Fedorow. And between the three of them, I took the liberty of providing them with some of the questions that we received from some credit unions in advance. There are about, I don't know, 9 credit unions or so on the line with us today, among the 3 dozen or so people that registered for this event. So thank you for joining us, and those of you that submitted questions or issues. So as some of you heard Commissioner Minoli reference before we started, you know, they've reviewed those questions and they're prepared to address those. But first, I thought it'd be a good idea if we could get Commissioner Minoli to share with us, just as long as we have this opportunity, to share with us a little bit of insight about what life has been like for the Department of Motor Vehicles in Vermont over the past year of pandemic. And I know hopefully we're on the way out of that right now and things are improving for everybody, but particularly for the department for today's discussion. And so Wanda, let me just throw it to you, if that's okay. And you're muted still. There you go.
I was hitting the microphone button, not the unmute. So good morning, everyone. And it is really a privilege to be before all of you today to answer your questions. It's really important for me and my team to be engaged in our partners. And some people would not consider your environment a partnership, but it is, because you are lending money to to individuals to purchase all sorts of vehicles that we have to register and title. Who would have thought the pandemic would have shut down DMV to the public? I never would have. I started my journey in 2016 as deputy commissioner and was appointed in 2018 as commissioner. And you know, the last year has definitely brought us challenges, but I am so fortunate to have the leadership team that I work with, because they have brought years of experience to the pandemic. And as in your business, we had to refocus on how do we serve the customers. So while our doors were closed March to June, and August for some services, we had to continue to serve the public. And we had extensions, but those extensions just bought us more time. And I think one of the biggest changes for us is we had to figure out, how do we provide services to Vermonters who, you know, needed to do this online, didn't have the opportunity to mail in, had unique transactions. And I think in your business, or in ours, one of the biggest changes was, you know, individuals that were buying vehicles, you know, directly, and how do we get them registered because they could not come in and provide their documents. You know, so through the transition, we really, and through the pandemic, we have transitioned to more online services. While we still don't have this perfect, we are getting better at it. But the online services really created an upfront opportunity for Vermonters to continue doing their business. That was the biggest change for us. We are regulatory. Just, you know, I think there's a comparison in the business that you do and that we do. We are driven by federal regulations and by state statutes, and we are production. And, you know, so those brought challenges. And again, and I say this all of the time, I am so impressed with my team, because we never thought with an outdated system that we have, that we would be able to engage in doing more services online. And what we're experiencing, even though our offices, we have 6 branch offices open, we are still seeing, since the pandemic, a higher number of transactions online or through the mail. And, you know, prior to the pandemic, over 70% of our customers were served in person. And that has shifted dramatically. And we have gone to a scheduling system in order to meet compliance with COVID and all of the regulations for individuals to come into our branch offices and do business. But even with that system, we are still seeing a reduction in people coming in. We have a high number of cancellations and no-shows because I think they are figuring out how they can get the service online. You know, we were faced, just like you were, with, you know, family members that had to be out because of school, you know, individuals with COVID. We were not in a position to have our staff telework like many businesses because of our system. And so our biggest roadblock and our biggest challenge was really production. And we had backlogs, and we still have some backlogs because we actually have to have the individuals in the office with the paper in front of them doing the transactions. And it is something that Director Smith has, you know, every day, and, you know, it's evolving and it's changing, and he's having to shift staff to meet those demands. So I'm sure for some of your customers, especially in the titling world and in the transferring world of vehicles or RVs or whatnot, you have experienced some of those delays. And while we still have delays, I am very confident in the work product and how we are getting those out. And we continue, as I said, to evaluate that. And that's it. It's business as usual. I mean, we're doing it. Some days are just a little rougher than other days.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that, Commissioner. We appreciate it very much. And, you know, we build this event for all of you from credit unions, and all the people from credit unions, I think, are mostly all lending related here, so that's to be expected. For this discussion, we did build this as a roundtable discussion, so we want you to feel free to unmute and make comments, ask questions, whatever, when it's convenient. When you're not talking, if you don't mind keeping your mic muted, that's helpful. And then also, if you don't feel comfortable talking, there's a chat box that you should feel free to post comments or questions in. If you don't see the chat box, on the bottom of your Zoom or browser window, you should see some icons, and one of them says chat. If you click on that, then this chat box should appear on the, I think it should be right-hand side for most of you. And you can feel free to post whatever you want to ask or comment on in there. And Christine and I will monitor those and bring them up as time permits, because we have quite a list of things that that were submitted to us. And we probably won't have time to get into every single one of them, but we'll do as much as we can and cover as much territory as we can. And so
Joe, if I can just add, if we don't get to everything, you know, I'm more than happy to host another discussion like this.
Awesome.
You know, we are available, and you know, and again, if more questions come up, we can also do some response in writing, you know, if necessary, just to help all of the members.
Very good. Thank you very much. Short of waiting for somebody to get brave and say something, Christine, I'm going to throw it to you, and maybe you can kind of guide us along a little bit here.
Sure. Thank you, Wanda. I have a question about POA documentation. I have been seeing a lot of businesses actually use the POA form for titling, and I was wondering if you have seen an uptick in that and how it could help a credit union if they implemented POA paperwork.
So that is one of the questions that was sent to us. So to everyone on the call, I'd like to introduce, you know, as Joe had mentioned, Sven Fedorow, who is our assistant AG, and Michael Smith, who's the director of operations. And I'm going to ask Mike in some scenarios to respond to the question, and then Sven may add to that if that's okay with everyone on the call. So with that, I think this goes to the question, Mike, about the lien holder and what resources do we have if members do not get us the title and there's no POA. So if you want to start with that one, I think it would be great.
So, so we are seeing an uptick in people using powers of attorney, mostly dealers. A lot of it's because, you know, people are not really available with COVID to come back in. I think dealers are also finding out that should they run into a situation where the customer hasn't signed a document, having that POA is pretty handy because then they can sign it. There's also situations where alterations happen on the title. They write down the mileage incorrectly. The title gets chewed up or coffee spilt on it, and they need to apply for a duplicate. In order to apply for a duplicate, you need the prior owner's signature. But if they have a power of attorney, then they utilize the power of attorney and sign for them, send a copy of the POA with it, and the transaction's processed. So
Now, do they, Mike, sorry, do they have to send in the original power of attorney document, or can they send in a copy?
a photocopy is fine. Yep. So, and one of your questions on here was, you know, does it have to be a specific power of attorney form? And the answer really is no. It needs to be a power of attorney. It needs to, and you know, we would review it and determine what it is that this person has authorization to sign for. Because if it was, you know, authorization to sign to pick up my coffee at the store and you've sent it in with a duplicate title, we're probably not going to take it. So,
So I have a follow-up on that because we did discuss it, and we're curious from your business standpoint why this is happening more, and is it just the lender's process, or because you don't have access, direct access to the customers or the dealerships? We're kind of curious why you're seeing an uptick.
Feel free to jump in, folks, and you're all the lenders, and you have far more experience with this than Christine and I do. So,
this is Lucy Klum from Heritage Family, and I've seen some POAs on titles that come from Florida or down south, and I think it's because the instances of COVID are a lot worse there than here.
Thank you.
And they're also,
Sven, is there anything that you want to add to this question?
I'm not sure if Sven is on or not.
Oh, he told me he had called in. Okay, well,
and there was also another question in the chat box that says, must the POA with our member's signature be notarized?
No. There's no requirement to have it notarized. Now, if your POA form has a notarization section on it, yes, notarize it. If it's not, then no, you don't need it. So.
Okay, and then someone else posted that I think we've been using more POA paperwork because members do not want to come back to the branches.
Right.
They are really limiting exposure and still have children at home during remote learning.
And we're seeing that with dealers too, because I bought a truck this last weekend, and one of the first documents that I signed was a POA, just in case something is missing. And you know, really, it's a time saver for everybody because you never know what can happen.
Yep, I agree.
so everyone, I just want you to know Sven is on the call and he's unmuted, but we're not sure if through this meeting, if he has to be linked in. Just putting that out there, if someone has control of a button for him so he can speak if necessary.
You should be able to be connected, Wanda, for audio just on the phone call if you dialed one of those numbers. And I see there's, I don't know, a half dozen or so people connected by phone. I just see phone numbers, so I don't know which one he may be. But he should be able to speak. You know, there's the muting in this program, but then there's also the muting on his phone too. So maybe one of those is still on.
So I will offer, Sven, if you can't get it to work, if you want to type any comments or if you have anything, please do so in the box, in the communication box.
Somebody just posted a message that it said if you hit *6, it will unmute, because I
Thank
do
you.
see Sven's phone number on there. So,
Is that the 4930, Mike?
no, he just
Hello,
unmuted.
I think,
Yeah.
There you go.
yeah, *6 worked. Thank you for that help. Sorry about that, everybody. Yeah, no, I was listening in on the POA discussion. Typically, in a real estate context or where you're recording something in a clerk's office, you want an original for that. But as Mike said, I don't think there's a need for an original in this context. So that was the only comment I had.
Good morning. This is Joe Gallagher from Vermont Federal Credit Union. And the POA subject is one that's near and dear to my heart because in addition to responsibility for upfront entitling and such, I also have collections within my area of responsibility. And of course, when it comes time to repossession, the title is everything. So I'm probably a little tainted because, it's just amazing what can happen. You think you're doing everything exactly the way it needs to be done. And then at the end of the line, maybe something wasn't quite in place the way it should have been. So we had implemented a POA form. And generally the way we're using it is basically, as Mike just described at the dealership, as part of the loan closing process, they're signing a document that says basically, in the event that anything gets in the way of our ability to become perfected on this lien, you authorize us to work with whomever, including the Department of Motor Vehicles, to perfect our lien. And I just want to kind of confirm that's what everybody's referring to here. And I'm thrilled to hear that we can do this. Clearly we don't want to. We want it all to work smoothly and have the member do what they do. But as we all know, you think you're covering every base and something unique is happening with one particular case. And it just makes it difficult. And then it's hard to get the person to cooperate. So I just want to say thank you that it's great that we have this option.
Yeah, and if I could just add, much of my background was in real estate practice, so I understand the importance of closing documents and also the importance of keeping close custody of those closing documents, because if things don't get properly executed or slip out of your hands, obviously problems can arise. So I was thinking, much of this problem might be addressable by just on the business practice side rather than, necessarily maybe on the legal side or any other aspect of it.
Cool.
Thank you. Wanda, do you want to go over the deceased information from DMV that you would have for our credit unions and how to handle any situation that comes up?
Do you want to punt that one to me, Wanda?
Well, I will, because I'm personally experiencing that. I don't mean to laugh at it, but I think, yeah, Mike, I think you can probably be very succinct with a response on how this works.
Yes. And really the best way is to go to DMV's website, search under deceased, and you will bring up this bulletin here. That is you can't see it, sorry. It's the deceased owner bulletin, and it runs down through all of the various situations that you could run into, whether there's a will, no will, probate, no probate, whether it's titled jointly, titled tenants in common, and it gives you the instructions on what you need to do. There was one question that talked about if there was a cost for the titles. There is a surviving spouse exemption on the back. It works for 2 vehicles. So, again, the information is right on the form. So I really think your best bet is to go to that forum anytime you have a question, because much like when I helped the commissioner out with her situation, I went to the forum because it's confusing and you really need to follow that guidance.
I'm curious from the members, is there a common scenario under this category that you're running into? And are you seeing a higher number because of COVID?
This is Joe Gallagher again from Vermont Federal, and I would just say that, again, because I'm on the collection side, the way we have it set up at our credit union is whenever a member is deceased or a member dies and they have any type of loan, including an auto loan, we have one person who kind of works with the survivors so that they don't have to be working with a lot of different people. This person's really good at it. And we really do our very best. Obviously, they're going through a difficult time. So we kind of handhold and do the best we can to provide good service to help these people through this. And, you know, again, every situation is unique and different. I couldn't say that there were more or less. It does feel in the business like, you know, this is kind of sad, but, you know, there's a lot of deaths. And it's just amazing how you're just aware of it when you're working at a credit union with 46,000 members. So it feels like a very regular thing in our day. And I guess I just like to hear from you, Mike, that sometimes it's just nice to be reminded that those services are out there. You know, I mean, that the information and the resources, I should say, on your website, because we're all just so busy, you know, and the things happen, you know, oh, what do I do? And sometimes you just forget, well, I could go to the DMV website and walk through the various scenarios. And we have a person, this person is actually, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the name. A paralegal as well. So she's pretty skilled at it, but a little long-winded, but I just wanted to let you know that I guess the scenarios are always quite different. There's always a different twist to it. We do work closely with people if a family member isn't even on the title or the loan, but wants to keep the vehicle. Because again, we're trying to work with them closely because of the difficult thing they're going through. But so again, thanks, Mike, because it's helpful to know that's out there.
Yeah, and you know,
And I would just say to the group, you know, again, if this is a subject matter that, you know, you'd like to have a 30-minute training where we could actually bring up the document and walk through specifics and the scenarios, because we too, you know, we're not the lender of the money, but we are the, in some scenarios, the last stop where all of the other legal documents are transferred, and it can be challenging. And there are multiple different scenarios that individuals have to go through. And you know, again, my staff in operations are very knowledgeable about this. And you know, we want to be a part of the success and the ease for the individuals and the families in, you know, getting this getting these documents aligned with what their new world is.
right, and it's advantageous for us to have the transactions correct when they come in the first time, you know. So I mean, anything we can do to help with that helps both of us. So,
you know, this is a great start. I mean, just this conversation, because I know, coincidentally, truly, one of my goals this year was, I call it everything you ever want to know about buying a car in Vermont and getting it titled and registered. And I'm big on kind of documentation. I'm a hound for that. And, you know, I'm even kind of wondering, you know, what you just said is so true, Mike, right? The two of us are only as successful as how well we're kind of partnering and educating.
absolutely, absolutely.
I'm almost wondering if, you know, there might be the option for some kind of partnership here to kind of create some documents that, you know, maybe there's some tweaking and such that could happen with the documents that you have that pertain more to our world on the lending side and vice versa. I just want to throw out there that you ever wanted to consider that, I'd be up for it.
Yeah,
and model for others in the state, you know.
Right. You know, and the one thing that I've learned, so I celebrate, I'm going to celebrate my 31st year at DMV this year. So the one thing that I've learned over my career here is it all makes sense to me. Why doesn't it make sense to you?
Yeah.
Well, I eat, sleep, and breathe this, and it's really, really easy. And, you know, and I find when it's like talking to my folks, they look at me like I have three eyes. It's like, well, how can you not understand? Right. But so absolutely, you know, and I'm happy to work with you. And, you know, if you wanted to set up some, you know, maybe even just some quarterly meetings, some monthly meetings, half hour here or there. And I mean, time is precious to all of us. But as I said before, it's like, if we help you to get the paperwork to us correctly, it's easier for us to get it back to you timely. So.
I think that's a great plan, and even if there's a subgroup to sort of work on it and we can bring it back, I mean, we're open. We are open to suggestions. And again, you know, Joe, and I do I like how you just worded that, because, it is, if we can have the documents exactly in the order, it's, for the customer not to have to say, well, I'm trying to do this, I'm trying to do this. And they're guided through those directions on this is what they want to accomplish. This is what we need. It's just a smoother transition. And again, I'm personally attached to this because it is a difficult journey. And it doesn't matter if you're the commissioner or if you're not the commissioner, so, and I too had, with my own staffs, had 150 questions and, and really had to seek guidance. And, I'm still not done. I'm still dealing on the lender side. But I think this is, it's common. It's more common than people realize. That's the other thing. And I would just like it very much, in partnership when, they do end up at, our window to take care of this. It's just smooth, short, sweet, and easy to address. So
It's interesting to hear that from both of you, because it's, I think sometimes people are almost afraid to say that I don't know, because I tell my kids all the time, things could be two things at once. So
Right.
part of me feels like, okay, you bought a car, you have to title. This is not a big deal. But then on the other side, it feels like, not quite. It's been 4 years since I did this. And every time you go to buy a car, especially if it's not through a dealership, it's kind of like, now what do I need to do? And where do I meet these people? And when do I sign it? And how do I make, all these different things? So it actually is quite complicated for people. I do believe it doesn't need to be, and we can provide them the resources, but I think people also need to feel free to, it's like, it is confusing. And
Right.
so I'll stop there. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. This is Sven Fedorow again. I have a question for the group out of curiosity. Going back to the POA issue, what evidence or what have you observed any kind of abuses occurring in association specifically with transactions involving POAs? And if so, what would you suggest or think on the DMV front could be done to prevent that, if this is an issue at all?
Anybody run across that? Fictitious POAs? Fraudulent?
I know we haven't at Vermont, but frankly, we haven't used them often. It's more of a security in the event that we need to. But I'd like to think, because again, as you said, Wanda, earlier on, we're partners. So in most cases, I would think, that's us bringing that to you to complete some process. So Lord knows, we all know fraud happens in every way here, but I don't want to minimize it. But I would think it would be fairly limited in this particular situation where we're using it to, perfect a lien. That's just my opinion.
And to my knowledge, and Mike nothing has brought to my attention that we are seeing a high level, risk in this category as this is occurring and as we've seen more. If that's correct, Mike, I think, Mike's example of what does the POA say? Right, that you can buy coffee for someone versus, you're doing your DMV transaction is probably the most common that you've experienced. Is that correct, Mike?
Yeah, and the more specificity, the better, right?
Along those lines of not POA, but the fraudulent aspect of it, and it doesn't sound like anybody sees much of that. But there's a question from Brenda in the chat box about fraudulent Vins. And I have to admit that I'm reading an article myself, I don't know, past week, 2 weeks maybe, about how that's done with Vin cloning and whatnot. And so the question is, have you seen much of any of that in Vermont, or is that something we're just reading about elsewhere?
We have not seen a lot of that here in Vermont. And I mean, we experience some fraud, and we have an enforcement and safety division that follows up on that. But VIN fraud is not one of the ones that we're seeing a lot of. So.
Let's hope it doesn't find its way here.
Yes.
Yeah,
Whoops.
We're probably both going to say the same thing, Mike.
I think so.
So first of all, we are seeing with the, for direct sales, that we were seeing an issue where you could go online and register and you were affirming that you would send your paperwork to us in 60 days. They were able to go back into the system and get another temporary plate, and they were messing with the VIN number a little bit there. And so we have corrected that action, but that would not, those were not individuals that you were lending money to. They were direct sales. And then we also implemented Navitas,
Bingo.
which is a national system that talks state to state. And so it's one record on the vehicle and the VIN, and Mike could get into the details. We are using that, and that is an extra validation for us at the time of processing the transaction. And I think we've run across a couple, but it was more data entry, I think, Mike, than it was fraudulent activity, if I'm recalling correctly.
Mostly data entry, but we did have one, excuse me, and it was a cloned VIN. It was from, I believe, Nebraska. And the reason that it got caught was the NVIDIS, which is the National Motor Vehicle Title Information System. So all of a sudden it said, wait a minute, this VIN exists in Nebraska. So, and that is the nice part about it, because you show up at the counter or you mail it in and we see a Georgia title and we punch it into NVIDIS and it says, nope, should be a Florida title. Now we have to have another conversation, right?
Wow.
It's one other.
And the system we've had in place for a little less than a year, is that correct, Mike?
Yes.
And I'm going to make a statement, and I'm recalling something. And Mike, we had talked about dealers would have the opportunity if they wanted to come into Navitas. Could banks also do that?
I think that NVIDIS is open to anybody who wants to register, and it's cheaper than Carfax. So you wouldn't be registering through us. You would be going on to the NVIDIS site itself.
And validating the vehicle is a clean vehicle.
Correct. And what it doesn't tell you is a lot of the stuff that comes through Carfax, right? It doesn't show you when the service has been done and stuff like that, but it will clarify brands. And that's one of the biggest things that NVIDIS is used for, especially after all the floods we had and hurricanes and all of those vehicles trying to be moved around before they got branded.
So Mike, back to if the lending institutes wanted to have access to this, is there a way for that to occur? So if they are giving a loan on a vehicle and they want to validate it's clean, is that a possibility?
I believe so. I believe you just go to the research vehicle history. So you'd want to Google NMVTIS, which is NVIDIS, National Motor Vehicle Title Information System. I just hit the website and it will give you information on how to work with that system.
So just to expand a little bit on this. So I think every state except for one now, is it Tennessee?
It sure is.
Tennessee is a part of NVIDIS. So all of the data on every vehicle goes into this. There's a fee associated when you use it, correct, Mike?
Yes.
And it's minimal, but it is an upfront validation. I mean, we're doing it at the time of registration, as Mike said, but obviously it would be an opportunity for you to look at it at the time of a sale, especially if it's a used vehicle.
Right.
And if you want us to send you the link or a little bit more information, we're happy to send that to Christine or to you, Joe. And if you want to just distribute it, you could.
Sure, that'd be great. Now, Wanda, are you saying that we should check the VIN if it's a private sale versus at a car dealership or everywhere?
So what? Want me to take
Go
that?
ahead, Mike.
So as a general rule, your Vermont titles, you don't really need to worry about. It's your out-of-state titles, right? So that's where you're going to see a brand potentially missing or something along those lines. So, as I said, it's not Carfax. Carfax does some stuff and it does talk about brand history, but NVIDIS also does some other things for you as well. I posted the link in the chat so that you can go in and play around and look at the system.
Thank you.
Look at the website and see what you come up with.
And Brenda had a question asking, is Vermont considering electronic titling? Other states adopted the process to not only help speed the process, but to prevent title fraud. And tracking of paper title is cumbersome.
So one of the problems that we have is that the system that we're using was created about, I don't know, 49 years ago. It's written in Cobalt. Cobalt programmers, as we like to say, are going in the ground, not coming out of college. So we're in a struggle with our system and cannot put electronic titling or electronic lien into it as it stands right now. We are heading down a path to replace our core system with a very much modern system. This modern system is used in about 18 jurisdictions right now, and that is going to bring us the possibility of endless possibilities of things that we can do, and e-titling and e-lien holder is one of those things that we will be pursuing. But understand that this system is going to be about a 3.5 year project, and e-titling and e-lien is probably not going to be in the first phase. So we're headed there, we're just not there yet.
So I think that's, back to some of our successes during the COVID, seizing the moment, right, is how we really look at it. And as Mike referred, we have over a 40-year-old mainframe system, and I think we have 17 subsystems that feed into it, and we have a very manual process. This year, we approached the legislature with a modernization effort. It is 2 distinct modules. And the first module, and Mike could highlight maybe after what we will get out of that, we were very fortunate to get legislative support of almost $25 million to implement the first piece of modernizing DMV and moving away from the mainframe. And we are very excited. The first module, once we start, will take us about 18 months. I am committed, and Director Smith knows this, any business that is affected by the module and where we are going to be changing our process, they will be a part of the conversation. They will be a part of testing. And this particular system that we are interested in is in all of it or components of it. Is in 22 states. It has a very high success rate, and we are celebrating. I mean, this is huge for the state of Vermont and for DMV. And Mike, if you just want to highlight the key items in the first module that we'll be engaged in, I think it would be helpful.
So the first module is vehicle services and point of sale. So point of sale is the collection and distribution of revenue that we bring in. Exciting to the financial folks, not so exciting to the rest of us. Oh wait, you're financial folks, so you're probably excited about that. But at the end of the day, the rest of it is the vehicle side. So that's going to be titling, registration, stuff like that. And it opens up, there's a dealer component in there as well. And one of the visions we have is, and I can make this really simple. So you go and you buy a car at a dealership. The dealer enters all this information into a computer that then prints it out on the registration form so they can mail it to us so we can type it into our computer system. Now, think about that for a second. They typed it into a system. Why can't they just send us the data? And then we can put the data in our system. So these are some of the enhancements that will come with this system. And while I sit here and I get all excited after 31 years of watching people type this stuff over and over and over again, I'm trying to temper myself to understand that day one, it's not going to fix all these problems, but the potential and the ability to move forward with a modernized system is just unbelievable. So. That's really, it's not super exciting, but again, this will open up the possibility for e-titling and e-lien holder down the road. So.
And that is our goal. I mean, to answer your question, Christine, we too want that same outcome. And again, because you can only imagine, at a minimum, we touch a document 7 times and we re-enter that data. And, if the lender and the dealership are validating all of this, to be able to receive it and do production immediately from that is significant. It's significant to the businesses, to the customer, and to our business. And so we have a plan going forward, and we are all very committed to making this happen. So continue supporting us on this.
You know, and one of the other things, and this will probably interest you guys, is, you know, there is the ability, and I hope to see it before the system goes in, to have a website where you can plug in a VIN number and find out, has it been titled and who's the lien holder? You know, so while you're sitting there saying, what is wrong with motor vehicles? They haven't sent me back the title. You would at least be able to find out, hey, you're on there as lien holder, right? So that will be advantageous for you.
Yeah, I think that would be really good, because I know when I used to do lending, you know, sometimes you wouldn't even have the title, and you would have to figure out who maybe the previous lien holder is when you want to refinance it over. So I think that would really help out the credit unions.
And
The
so what
problem-
Mike is referring to on that, we're in the process right now of working with Nick, who does some of our online services, and we are internally developing this tool. And I'm not sure, Mike, if you think like in 60 days we'll be ready to test it, or if it's going to be a little bit longer, just to give the group an idea.
I would say it's going to be a little bit longer than that. I'd say more around the 6-month time frame. So.
Well, it all sounds exciting anyway, and in particular, you need core system whenever that happens down the road. And
Mhm.
the problem with having these kinds of discussions, talking about this kind of stuff, is that we all, including you, all want it all tomorrow.
Yes, yes.
But in the meantime, we have to keep making phone calls and shuffling papers around. And that's what many of these questions that we sent off to you are about.
And Joe just posted another question. Would Vermont DMV accept and act on a POA form that was electronically signed by our members through DocuSign rather than ink?
Yes.
Yeah, so we actually went through a little bit of this with the Dealers Association. So Vermont has passed an act for electronic signatures. So we do accept electronic signatures on virtually any document coming to DMV. And when I say virtually, there is a reason for that. The odometer disclosure statement based on NHTSA regulations requires a wet signature. So you can electronically sign all your loan documents, that's your business. You can electronically sign the registration form. You can electronically sign a bill of sale, but the odometer disclosure statement must have an original wet signature on it.
Well, that must be hard for the dealerships, because they can send everything electronically and then they have to mail out the odometer statement.
Well, they aren't able to send us electronic documents yet. That will come with the core system. But yeah, I mean, in the original conversations with the Dealers Association, it was like, okay, so you got to have the customer come in and sign this document anyway. Why don't you have them sign the other two?
Right.
But at the end of the day, the state did adopt an electronic signature statute. So we are accepting electronic signatures, just not on the ODS.
Well, that's good.
And so the Vermont DMV is a part of a national association, which is we refer to as AMVA, and all of the jurisdictions, are very involved in this. And this is where we try to set, state to state policy and consistency. So the particulars on the odometer reading is one that every state is struggling with. And Mike, I don't know in your conversations with AMVA if they have talked about pursuing any changes at the federal level on this.
So the conversation's been going on for many years. NHTSA is not bending at all. They did put out a final rule, I want to say 2 or 3 years ago, that does allow for limited use of a electronic signature on an odometer disclosure statement, but you have to employ NIST level 2 at least authentication. So there's quite a bit of work to get that authentication method put into the system. So the opportunity is there, but we don't have that, and not many states do. So,
And we hope with the new system that we may be able to get that opportunity. But
Mhm.
that again is in the 3-year window period unless something changes.
And systems aside, as you well know, our association's primary reason for being is advocacy, right? So we're very active in the Vermont legislature on a daily basis whenever they're in session and when they're not in session too. And so to the extent that there are aspects of Vermont law that, could be streamlined or modified in some way, whether minor or major, to your benefit and to lenders' benefits and to car dealers' benefits, it seems like we're in a position to help reinforce those kinds of efforts and coordinate between lenders, dealers, and DMV as appropriate and whatnot. So keep us in mind when you're having those kinds of discussions. Christine.
There is another question that we received earlier about cross-state lending. Are credit unions covered if a dealer files a Vermont title with a New York member's address and then they file a New York UCC for another piece of loan? So like a trailer and a motor on a boat loan?
So, this is one that we kind of, my advice there is to seek legal counsel. So it's not something that I can advise you as to whether you're covered or not. That's a legal question. And I kind of bounced it around with our attorney, but we should not be giving you legal advice. So.
Mike, in reality though, if we got one of those transactions, as described, what is your policy and best practice in how we handle that?
I don't know how to answer that question.
Okay.
So if we have a dealer that files a Vermont title with a New York address, and so I'm thinking to myself, you're going to title the boat, right? If this is a boat and trailer, the trailer is probably not going to be titled. The motor that's on the boat is technically part of the boat, in our opinion. So I don't know how to answer that question as to whether you're covered.
If the person who submitted the question is online, if they would like to maybe give more
elaborate
information about it.
Apparently not.
Nope.
Right.
Nope. They must not have been be on the
So we have time
line.
for a couple more, Christine.
Okay. Let's see. I know that we covered a lot for POA, and a lot of the questions that we did receive had to do a lot with POA. So I'm hoping that we covered everything from the questions that we received. And if you had any more questions on that, if you could let us know.
That, or do you want me to plow down through the ones we missed?
Sure.
Okay, so you'll learn from me after a while that I can talk forever.
So Mike, I was just going to the list, so thank
Yep.
you for taking the lead on.
So one of the questions was rights of ownership on the lien form. If they don't list it, we default to joint tenants. So on a registration form or a lien form, if there's two owners on it and it's not checked off, we're going to automatically default to joint tenants. So, private
Sorry,
sale.
can everybody hear me?
Yep.
So this is Hillary from Heritage Family. We were the ones that had asked the question about the cross-state boat loans. So we have a dealer who is right on the border between Vermont and New York and has a lot of members who come over to purchase their boats through that dealership. And they have been sending in the registrations for just the boats to the state of Vermont with the member's New York address.
Yep.
And when we do our loans, we take boat, motor, and trailer as collateral. And because New York has different rules than Vermont, the motor and the trailer are kind of being stuck out in kind of no man's land because they're not really being dealt with in Vermont or New York.
Okay.
So that's kind of our conundrum with those particular types of loans.
Yeah, and that's the hard part, because it's not really it's not a situation that motor vehicles can answer. You know, we're gonna register and title the boat. It sounds like the trailer must be getting registered in New York, and I would say at that point in time, if you had to repossess or whatever, it would be based on New York's laws. I don't know how else to answer that.
Do you have any suggestions as to who we would want to speak to about that with legal counsel? Because we've tried to ask the question many times with many different legal entities, lawyers through the credit union, and we really haven't been able to come up with a answer to the question. It's kind of been not really answered in a legal way. So we're just kind of, at this point, we're stuck in as to what we can do, because we really haven't been able to get an answer from any source that we've tried to get in touch with.
If I can step in, this is Sven Fedorow again. I would be happy to have conversation with your legal counsel if we want to just come up with, or just figure out what's going on here and maybe come up with some ideas. I'd be happy to do that, absolutely. So feel free to reach out at any time.
Sounds great. Thank you very much.
All right, so there was a lot of questions on this list in regards to, if somebody doesn't have all the documents, can we bond it? So bonding is a process in and of itself, and much like with deceased owners, I would say go to our website, search under bond instructions and bond form, and it will bring up the instructions that you would need to follow in order to bond a vehicle. If you're going to bond a vehicle, it's not because some of the paperwork just didn't show up, it's because the paperwork would be unavailable, meaning that you would need to show by written documentation you've made every reasonable attempt to obtain that title or ownership document before you start moving down the bonding route. So again, check the form out, it's got the statute on it, and will be helpful to you. If you have questions, then reach out to us, but at the end of the day, I think you're going to find that most of the questions are answered right on that instruction sheet. Let's see, private sales, never got title. We talked about bonds a little bit. So Vermont resident, Vermont dealer, member pays fees for registration and title with a lien holder. Dealer goes out of business and does not file registration. What can we do or the member do that does not have the paperwork? So first and foremost, if it is a Vermont dealership that's gone out of business, your first stop should be our Enforcement and Safety Division. We license the dealers and we regulate them, and we would be able to assist you with figuring out what, when, where, and who, and how. So. Lease buyouts. Are we going to be able to register and title with Heritage as a lien holder if we have a POA? How do we do the fees? So if you're buying out a leased vehicle, tax, title, and registration fees are due. If you were the lessee and you're buying out the leased vehicle, the tax is based on the other half. So originally you paid tax on acquisition minus lease and buyout. When you buy that lease out, you would pay the tax based on the buyout amount, regardless of what you purchased it for. Title would be assigned from the lending institution, Chase Manhattan, or whoever the actual lessor is, over to whoever the registered owner is going to be. You'd file the paperwork with motor vehicles, registration fees. If it's a car, $76. If it's a title with a loan, which I'm sure it would be, it'd be $46 plus 6% of the buyout amount. So, so in very long manner, yes. Certificate of origins, it says, is the credit union going to be able to do the registrations? My first thing that I wrote down is I'm not sure how you got the certificate of origin. Usually those are for brand new vehicles coming from dealerships, so I'm not really sure how a credit union would come into possession of one of those. So I don't know if there's somebody on here that wrote the question that could explain that a little bit. Okay, well, let's move along. Vin verifications. One of the things that we did in the miscellaneous bill.
Mike, before we move on to that, again, if that question, if someone wants to articulate it more in writing, I think it's, it's really it's important. and I'd like to be able to help answer it instead of I don't know if they're on the call. But-
Someone wrote in, they think they're talking about ATVs
Mhm.
products instead of vehicles.
So in the situation of an ATV, that would be one where you could end up with that MCO. And, I mean, yes, you should be able to process the registration, because really, if you think about it, you're going to fill out a registration form, or you're going to have one in somebody's name. The manufacturer certificate of origin is the ownership document. You're going to send that to DMV with the appropriate fees, right?
So I'm curious in this world, and I'm asking because I don't understand, why would this be different for an ATV than a vehicle or a boat?
ATVs are off-road vehicles. They're not registered for on-road use, and there's really no requirement to register them. So if you're going to operate it on your own land, you may have bought it, got a lien on it, and never took the opportunity to register and title it. So in which case, I think the lending institution would end up holding that MCO.
And usually if there's a lien on the vehicle or ATV, then they would have to register it and insure it if it's
Right.
with a credit union.
Right. So, and then at that point, as a general rule, if you're buying it from a dealership that sells ATVs, they're probably doing that work for you, right? So, but yes, if you possess it and it's signed over appropriately and there's a registration form filled out and money, we'll take it. So VIN verifications. Basically, with the advent of the National Motor Vehicle Title Information System, we have stopped doing VIN verifications pretty much entirely. The one situation where we are doing VIN verifications is on salvage vehicles. So if somebody is trying to register a salvage vehicle, we still require that VIN be verified, because we want to make sure that it hasn't been moved, adjusted, fraudulent, all of that. So there was a question on here about dirt bikes.
Mike, before you go on, are there any questions on the items that Mike has talked about? Because he's moving right through this list. Any follow-ups? I'm just doing a check-in before we go to the next.
Okay.
Okay.
So this is the last one, and we're right at 11:30, so this does good. So dirt bikes. How do we know if a dirt bike can be registered and titled in Vermont if we don't have a copy of a certificate of origin stating it's for off-road use only, or if we do get a copy but it does not list as off-road? So if it's a dirt bike and it's not designed for street use, that MCO is going to say off-road use only. Now, we have a process in Vermont that you can modify a dirt bike and make it street legal. In order to do that, you have to do a lot of work to it. It's got to have blinkers, headlights, all of that stuff. And then we ask that you take it to an inspection station and have them perform an inspection. And they will give you a copy of a document that you can then send to us with your application showing that it will meet the inspection requirements. If it doesn't meet the inspection requirements, it cannot be registered for on-road use.
Well, thank you, Mike, for going through all those questions.
Yes.
Does anybody else have any other questions that they would like to ask?
I'm sure there are a ton more questions if we gave people enough time and everybody didn't see that their clock was at 11:31 when we said we'd be done at 11:30. This discussion could probably go on at length, but thank you, Wanda, Mike, and Sven, for spending this time with us and covering all of this territory. It seems like we went into a lot of different nooks and crannies and everything. And thank you, Wanda, for your offer early on and your starting comments about, perhaps there's an opportunity for us to get together like in this kind of format or whatever kind of format the future holds from time to time to do this kind of thing on a more, I'll call it more regular basis. But the thought occurred to me during this discussion, maybe if we went down that path, we'd want to focus in particular areas, separately, so we can have a more detailed discussion about whatever the subject at hand happens to be. And maybe sometimes it might be worthwhile involving a representative from the dealer association for a particular discussion, or, wherever else. But, with 64% of Vermonters that are members of credit unions, and vehicle lending having been at the core of credit unions since the dawn of time, it seems like, Vermont credit unions are doing a lot of this kind of business, or a big percent of whatever vehicle lending is going on in the state. And so you're right, having a partnership between credit unions as lenders and DMV is a good way of putting it. So thank you.
I really think there's opportunity, Joe. And again, I think our success, when we're all working together, we have, that was my warranty on my car. No, I apologize. And no, we don't sell your data, so you get all of those calls. I just want to make that very clear, even though everyone thinks we do. Back to, really more than happy to do this. And I appreciate, as we're moving forward, if there's statutory changes that we can partner on, I think, we need to do check-ins. I do love the idea about, at least inviting Marilyn Miller from, the Dealerships Association to participate. They're really going through changes. And Vermont dealers are seeing a lot of changes, especially with, electric vehicles. And they're seeing a shift in their business, and they're trying to adjust. And so I think it's, it's just a great opportunity. And I'll let you lead on this. I really like your suggestion, Joe, about if we have one subject area where we can, put a presentation together, lead you there, answer your questions. I think that would be very, very helpful. I would like to take Mr. Gallagher up on his offer to work with Mike directly, just to see if we can provide more detailed information, or really just walk through the process, regarding the deceased and what our page looks like, and being able to help your members, because the more information you can offer your member, again, it's helping them through a very difficult phase. And, so I would offer, if you want to do this, on the, as a side project, I really encourage it and welcome it.
Well, thank you again, Wanda, Mike, and Sven, and to everyone that participated in this call today. Again, we'll make a recording of this available to you in the next couple of days, and we'll send the link out to all of you that participated in case there's anything you want to review again. We'll follow up with all of you with, whatever pieces, parts we said we'd provide links to or whatnot. And we'll work with you, Wanda, and your folks on trying to come up with something on a recurring basis.
Great.
It'll be helpful to everyone.
That's wonderful. Best meeting of the day. So thank you all.
Hopefully it's your only meeting of the day.
No.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. It's been great. Have a good rest of your day.